This case is about the doctrine of discovery. And the research that I did, and most of us, I think even I, sort of thought, well, this is sort of when the doctrine of discovery started in American law. Well, that's what my research and my book, which I just want you to let you know, it's going like hotcakes, because I only brought 3 and she bought 1 already. So that's all that I had left in my office today, so it's all I could bring along. I do have flyers. You can buy them from me later if you want. Oh my gosh. Now, where was I before I started selling books? See, I used to be a used car salesman, so I like to sell stuff. Miller's Used Cars, 33rd and Powell. Come on, guys. Well, of course I was at the doctrine of discovery. It's all I talk about. So where was this case? Well, let's go back and tell you just real quickly what this case was about. Oh, well, I know where I was going first. Okay. And this is what my research ultimately did. I tried to prove how the doctrine of discovery was brought from Europe and then adopted into American law by our early 13 colonies, then by our states, then by our federal government. And most of us think Johnson v. McIntosh is sort of when it started. But the research I showed, all our colonies understood this legal principle. It's how they dealt with the natives from 1608 forward in Jamestown, 1620 forward in Plymouth colony, etc. But I want to explain to you what Johnson v. McIntosh is about. In 1773 and 1775, a company sent a guy through the woods of what's now Illinois and Indiana, just to the left of Ohio there, of course, and he was buying land from Indians, directly from Indians out in the woods. Ultimately, allegedly buying over 400,000 acres and allegedly paying Indian people over $24,000 in money. A lot of money in those days. His grandson brought the Johnson v. McIntosh lawsuit. Mr. Johnson is the grandson of the man that 50 years earlier, see, we look at that date and we think, gee, that's almost old in American history, 1823. We've already been around for 30, 40 years. But don't forget what this case is about. It's about land sales made by an English citizen in 1773 and 1775 from the Illinois and Piankashaw Indians in what's now Indiana and Illinois. Mr. McIntosh, though, is living on the land, farming it. He bought the land from the United States, who signed a treaty in 1813 with the Illinois and Piankashaw tribes. So McIntosh got his title to the land through the United States, who signed a treaty with these tribes allegedly buying their land. And this case is really just asking a simple question. Who owns the land? As between Johnson, whose grandfather bought it directly from Indians out in the woods in 1773, or how do you buy Indian lands? Is Mr. McIntosh the legal owner? So the court goes into a history. I guess I'll recount the history before I even throw it. Well, let's throw the first slide up. This court, the Supreme Court, 8-1, says this country was settled on discovery and conquest. So he adopts international law and he gives this name to it that we call it today, discovery. And he recounts, and I'm only going to tell this to you briefly, it's a 30-page opinion, even though Marshall says it's an easy case. He says this is an easy case, but like all lawyers, he then writes 30 pages about it. He recounts a history, I'm going to tell you just very briefly. It starts primarily with the Portuguese in 1434, and when they want to own the Canary Islands, and they want to own the Canary Island people. So King Duarte of Portugal, who do you think he turns to? Well, he turns to the Pope. I mean, who's the most powerful person on the earth probably in 1434, at least in Europe, is probably the Pope, right? So King Duarte asks the Pope, give me Portugal, give me the Canary Islands. He said, why, these people are heathens. They have no clothes, they have no money, they have no agriculture, they have no religion, they have no laws. All these lies that you've heard repeated about native people, no matter where you go. We were the heathens. What do you mean? You're the one that came in and started scalping us and killing us and taking everything. We think you're the heathen. But anyway, this is the same argument that King Duarte made to the Pope. And to his credit, at first the Pope said no. He said, hey, they're not Christians, but they are humans. And you can't just own them. But that argument didn't work too good because King Duarte, pretend you're the Pope. You're the Pope. Pope, you give me the Canary Islands, I will convert them to Catholicism. And there'll be more Christians. What should I do?
You should do it.
Okay, she's the perfect Pope. How? I mean,
No, you should not.
I didn't mean it that way. Anyway, the Pope did grant, in 1436, issued a papal bull that granted Portugal the right to control, civilize, and Christianize the Canary Island people. Well, in subsequent decades, Portugal continued its explorations down the west coast of Africa. It started finding people it wanted to enslave, products it wanted to have, gold it wanted to have, and so it turns to the Pope again. And in 1453 and 1455, Pope Nicholas V issues new papal bulls. I bet you can read all of these papal bulls online. If you don't know what a papal bull is, it's an order of the Vatican, from the Pope. A papal bull, B-U-L-L. So I'm not making fun of it. I didn't mean it was BS. It's called a papal bull. And you can read, most of the ones I'm quoting to you are online. So in 1453 and 1455, the Pope grants to Portugal not just the powers to control, civilize, and Christianize. Now he grants the powers of sovereignty, jurisdiction, and title. The Pope thought he had the power to grant away ownership of the lands of the indigenous peoples of Africa. Well, Spain was feeling, now you know I'm going to get to Columbus, right? This is our anti-Columbus Day thing, right? Okay, we'll get there real quick, maybe right now. So Columbus, of course, is an Italian who first tried to get England to fund him going west, then tried to get France to fund him going west, then tried to use Portugal to fund him, finally comes to Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. And he says, I think I can go that direction. He says, I think I can find land. And I'll help you get it. Now, what do you all think he went west for? What do we taught about Columbus? He was looking for sugar, right? And for whatever. Spices and pepper and cardamom and cinnamon. Cinnamon, can't say that. Pepper! Maybe that's true. And also, did he think he was going to fall off the edge of the earth? I don't think that's true at all. In fact, I've seen various historians writing that that's just not true, period. No way did they think the earth was flat that late. The Portuguese had been whaling off the west coast of Greenland since the 1300s. They knew you could go west. They knew there were lands out there. So that's what Columbus goes for. So he signs a contract with Isabella and Ferdinand. It doesn't say a word about spices. You can look his contract up online if you want to read it. Nothing in there about spices. Yes, he hoped to ultimately get to China. Yes, he ultimately hoped to find the Japans and maybe engage in trade. But on his way there, he hoped to do a little bit of this. Because so far, all the papal bulls had been doing was favoring Portugal. And Spain had been left out of these explorations. So what did his contract say? Isabella and Ferdinand said, and I can quote some of this, they said, we will make you, quote, the admiral over any lands that you acquire for us. That's what his expedition was about. Cross and flag in the soil and claim it for Spain. So when he lands, what did he land on? San Salvador, I think, the first island in the Caribbean. He landed on 3 or 4 more. He kidnapped a few people. He tried to find some gold to prove the value. Cut some trees down to show how good the wood was. And he races back to the Spanish court. He doesn't go on to try to find China and Japan, does he? He's found something real valuable. And in fact, what did the contract say? Oh yeah, they were going to make him the admiral over any lands that he acquired for them. So Columbus is on his way back. He returned. In fact, I don't know exactly how this happened, but before he really got back to the court of Isabella and Ferdinand, they already knew what he had found. In fact, the Portuguese king held him for a little while and was maybe going to kill him. The Portuguese king was mad that he hadn't paid for that trip to the west. But anyway, Isabella and Ferdinand send their attorneys to the Pope, who's now Alexander VI. And now they say it's time for us to get a papal bull. You've been giving the rest of the world to Portugal. How about giving us some? So in May of 1493, folks, remember Columbus sailed that ocean blue in 1492? Well, by the time he returned and they got their attorneys to the Pope, in May of 1493, Alexander VI issues 3 papal bulls. and he grants now Spain the same rights in the lands Columbus has found to control, civilize, and Christianize the heathen savage people, and to acquire sovereignty, jurisdiction, and title. So the same rights that Portugal had been granted in Africa and the islands, the Cape Verde Islands, the Madeiras, I forget, there's 3 or 4 islands. A very interesting point too, folks, is that in one of these papal bulls, and again, this disproves, I think, this idea that we thought the earth was flat then. The Pope draws a line from the North Pole to the South Pole in these May 1493 papal bulls, and he grants Portugal all rights east of that line to explore, conquer, and acquire sovereignty, jurisdiction, and title, and he grants Spain all those same rights west of that line to explore, conquer, and acquire sovereignty, jurisdiction, and title. Now, the next year, Spain and Portugal signed the Treaty of Tordesillas, and they moved that line about 500 miles to the west because Portugal wanted some of South America. What language do they speak in Brazil? What language do the people speak everywhere else in the New World, practically? Spanish. You think that happened by accident? No, it was that line that the Pope drew. I'm literally writing an article on this same subject right now about Brazil and how Portugal used the doctrine of discovery in Brazil. And these maps that you or these maps that you see, even really old ones, have this line, the Pope's line, that then Spain and Portugal agreed to move further west, drawn on it. So the entire world was divided for just the Spanish and just the Portuguese. Now what I'm telling you right now is in this opinion. The United States Supreme Court relied on international law, what Europeans had done in their legal regimes, to answer this simple, according to Marshall, legal question: how do you buy land from Indians? Do Indians own a property right such that they can just sell it to you when you show up? Or they can just sell it to Johnson's grandfather when he walked through the woods? And ultimately the question is no. Indian tribes do not own the full fee simple title. That's what we call it in the law, folks. When you and I buy a house, you are called the fee simple absolute owner. This comes directly from English property law that we, of course, adopted with our 13 colonies. So, I own a house, so I am the fee simple absolute owner. I have certain rights under property law. The court was simply asking in this case whether tribal governments were the fee simple absolute owners of their land, and the answer was no. Because Europeans showed up